Looking back, I probably had symptoms of Parkinson's when I was in my early 40s. I was diagnosed when I was 45, which is young. The average age of onset is roughly 60 years of age. The age of onset is getting younger, though, a little bit statistically, which is alarming, of course.
When I met Bruce, I was in the process of adopting a baby. I was single. Then after I adopted my son, we got married, and shortly after that we discovered he had Parkinson's, and then about a year after that we adopted our daughter. So we figure we're in it for the long haul, because we've weathered just about, it seems like, most stresses that a couple can.
After I got out of college, I was a staff writer for United Press International. I started off covering the protests at the Nixon and McGovern conventions in Miami Beach, covered the election returns in Washington, and then they said, "Do you want to come on full time?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Where would you like to go?" And much to their surprise, I didn't say New York or Rome or London. I said Vermont or Maine, in that order. They were kind of taken aback. But I thought, that's where I want to end up, and I don't want to be cranking out this copy for United Press International my whole life.
When Bruce was first diagnosed, he was sort of in a denial phase for a while. I was actually more upset than he was, because I think I didn't have as deep a denial. It wasn't me. I came through it pretty quickly. He's never been deeply upset about having the disease. He's a pretty extraordinary person.
That's good.
Is Alex awake? He is, right?
Yeah, he's taking a shower.
This one is Requip, and it tricks my nerve endings into thinking that they've been stimulated by a signal. This one's Mirapex, costs $300 a month, and it also does similar things to Requip, helping my nerves think they've got a proper impulse. This one is Selegiline, the generic form of Eldepril, and it makes me feel symmetrical and basically more symmetrical. This one is Amantadine. It's actually an anti-flu virus compound. Researchers found that when people who had the flu took one of these pills, if they had Parkinson's, they felt a lot better, coincidentally. They don't know how it works, but it really makes a difference. It makes me feel much more able to walk and much more ambulatory. I just feel a lot better. So I used to take the pills one by one, but as the daily dosage increased, I just learned to take them all at once and save time. Bye. Bye. So, Alex, you don't have anything after school, right?
Just a daycare.
Oh, you did it? Okay. This is what I'll do. I'll make a pizza and then we'll go to the play.
Okay. Yeah.
My dad's mother, in her latter years, and she lived into her 80s, she had Parkinson's disease, and interestingly enough, my dad's sister had Parkinson's disease, so I'm the third generation. There may be a genetic predisposition or vulnerability. So a lot of research is pointing toward environmental toxins as possible triggers for the onset of the illness. The book I'm writing, called Sowing Tears, Reaping Joy, The Transformation of Chronic Illness, is a book I hope to have done by the end of the winter. It's in 3 basic parts, plus a little other stuff stuck on the front and the back. The beginning talks about, are you sick enough to read this book, or who is this book really for? It's for people who are really serious about having a great life, not despite their illness, but with their illness. I tell my story, and then I jump into the first major part called the Odyssey of Illness. In that part, we rummage around in the world of illness. You sort of set up a context for the book. I had a desk that was right outside the office of the president of the company where I worked, and every time he'd go by while I was supposed to be typing, I'd pick up a piece of paper and sort of shuffle it around so he couldn't see my hand not working well, and so I hid it. This is what Parkinson's is doing to my brain. I do a lot of stuff that I did before I got Parkinson's. I do a lot of the cooking. Judith and I split it at least in half, and when she's been in very busy jobs, I've done more than that. A lot of the cooking, help clean the house, get the kids out the door, go grocery shopping, do all that stuff. About the only thing that I can't do very well is tie my shoes. When I was diagnosed, immediately the income took a dive. My boss, the program I was working in was being cut back. It was a big public relations project at this company. But the boss was great. He kept me on part-time, and I could work out of the house. And it allowed us to generate some income there, for which I'm really grateful. Judith has really carried the ball. I mean, she's worked hard, and we cut corners, and I get Medicare, which is a big help, pays for virtually all the medical expenses, and periodically I've gotten assistance for pharmaceuticals, for medications. Vermont's a great state to be sick in compared to many others. When I was first diagnosed, the thought that plopped into my head was, this is the beginning of my life going down the tubes, here we go. And it seemed like a legitimate way to look at it. Of course, that left me feeling pretty rotten.
One of the ironies of him getting Parkinson's is that one of the first effects is he couldn't do what he was trained to do. He was in a funk, and he started talking to me about, I didn't sign up for this, and how could I want to stick around? And I got very angry. I got pissed off at him. I said, how could you believe I was that shallow? How can you believe I'm that shallow, that I would, ditch you? I married Bruce because he's Bruce, and whether or not he has a disease or not is not relevant for me.
There is no cure for Parkinson's disease, but researchers say they are within years of developing one. In the meantime, close to 2,000 Vermonters are dealing with the degenerative effects of the disease. Tonight on Switchboard, we'll discuss Parkinson's disease and take your calls. Join us next for Switchboard here on Vermont Public Radio. Bruce Talbot, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
And also with us, Dr. Robert Hamill, who's chair of the UVM Department of Neurology. Robert Hamill, good
It's
day.
nice to be here. Thank you.
I have a great neurologist, and I see him about 2 or 3 times a year. He's Dr. Robert Hamill, chairman of the University of Vermont Neurology Department, and he's really helped me a great deal. Because the illness is progressive, when I see him, he often tinkers with my medication levels and the mix of medications that I take.
So how have you been?
I've been good. Judith gave me a list of stuff I'm supposed to tell you about, though. Just sort of general, kind of a little stiffer and slower, and she said she thinks I need a medication adjustment.
And if you had to choose the problem that bothered, the 3 problems that bother you the most, what would they be?
One thing that I don't like is I stammer a little bit. I wish I were a little more fluid and a little more, that information sort of come into my mind more readily. Instead of getting dressed, it's slower and painstaking, buttoning especially. Getting out of a car. When I was, for the first couple of years when I was diagnosed, I didn't get any medication. I tried alternative therapies like acupuncture and Chinese herbal therapy, which I think, were helpful approaches. But when I saw Dr. Hamill for the first time, I was concerned that he'd put me on Cinemet, which they believed at the time, and they're not so certain about it now, that Cinemet had a limited corridor of usability, and once you used it up, it wouldn't be effective anymore. So once I started getting medicated, for the first time, it provided me little windows of when I wouldn't be thinking about my Parkinson's, because it used to be every movement was affected, and you just go, damn, I think that, because you wake up in the morning and you hope that you before you move, you think maybe it's gone and I can move normally again. And then you start to get up out of bed and you can't get up and you can't swivel over to put your feet on the floor and, damn it, it's still here. Well, once I started getting on medication, I'd go maybe a couple of minutes and not think about my Parkinson's, and it felt so good not to have that constant barrage of disappointing and frustrating feedback.
Right. Good. All right. You're probably under-medicated.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, where are we in terms of medications? You're on 16 of Requip, you're on 2 milligrams of Mirapex. And the question really would be, is pushing any of them any harder going to make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
Or, again, we've talked about this before, or are we approaching at least a trial of carbidopa-levodopa to see how you do?
My dad, a retired internist who saw thousands of sick people during his lengthy medical career, told me early on, don't identify yourself as your illness. I have Parkinson's. I am not Parkinson's. That distinction has served me well.
One of the things that I like to tell people is, partners of people with Parkinson's, is that, there's a lot of focus on the person with Parkinson's. But it's very important that you, as the partner, take care of yourself. And that is just as important. In some ways, it can be more important because people are depending on you more than they would be if the disease wasn't in their lives.
Come on, Rafi, come on.
You gotta go back to school, okay? Alejandro,
So I'm not
in bed by 9:30, okay? Let's go on.
Put water in it and put it on the board.
Oh yeah.
What I would love to see is a cure for Parkinson's disease. I would, although in an extraordinary way, Bruce has made having the disease very rich for all of us. Of course, we would prefer that he not have it. I would love to see a cure in our lifetime. The scientists, neurologists, keep telling us how close we are to a cure. And we are hoping that's going to happen. Other than that, I think that we'll just continue to live life and enjoy it as much as we have to.
I need your loving every day. You hear what I say?
There could be some pretty heavy stuff coming down the line. So I kind of hoped and prayed and wished for some better idea to plop into my head, and it did. What plopped into my head was, this is going to be a huge contribution to my life and to the lives of a lot of other people. I don't know how, but it's going to be. I heard about this walk in New York, and I thought, that's something I can do. I can at least get out there. I knew I looked pretty young, and it kind of surprised people that I had this illness that people normally think of as an old-timers or senior citizens illness. And so I thought I can lend my full head of dark brown hair to the cause and walk in Central Park. And that's how I got going. And I felt great about it. It was a wonderful experience. And I realized that the more I can sort of meld my life into something bigger than I am, the more, the grander and more fulfilling my own life could be. And so I've been very involved in doing things for Parkinson's and a lot of other activities too.
There's a long period of recognition because the disease comes on so slowly that you're sort of constantly adjusting. It's never like, okay, I'm adjusted and I'm done. It's sort of part of life. You're constantly shifting and more deeply understanding what it means to live with the disease.
I don't know what the future holds for me exactly. Parkinson's generally is not a terminal illness. I expect I'll live a long life. My dad just turned 92, and I've got that same gene pool. And I think there could be a cure. If not a cure, they could really treat the symptoms very effectively. I tell people I meet, if you're going to get Parkinson's, now is not a bad time to get it. There's a lot of hope. And even if I get disabled, I'm still me. I am. The real me in me is doing just fine.